Well, we are in the middle, towards the end, not at the end, but getting close towards it, of a series of the School of Faith. It doesn't mean the school is over once the series finishes, but we've been looking at a collection of talks, sermons around this idea, really just leaning into faith and exploring it. And when it comes to faith, and a lot of you in the room, you've walked with God for a number of years, journeying with God. I grew up in a household where I had a mother that taught me about Jesus, knew all about God. I had the scriptures hidden in my lunchbox. That kind of household. At 15, my friends were sneaking out to parties. I was just sneaking out to watch Harry Potter. And I kind of grew up in that household with a mum that loved Jesus, but God became real to me in my later teenage years when it went from an idea to actually, God, I believe in this. Where it wasn't just a thought, it wasn't a story, it wasn't just a Bible, it wasn't just my mum's faith, it wasn't my family's faith, but a defining moment where I said, no, God, I have faith behind this. I have a belief that you are real. And the journey of faith, we use faith, in Christianity for a whole bunch of things, but faith is really our trust in God. It's leaning into God. It takes faith to believe in God. First and foremost, it takes faith to actually believe in God and say, no, this is not a story, this is not a myth, this is just not another idea on creation, this is not just another thought out there in the universe. I have faith that this is the truth. God created us, we are formed to live in relationship with Him, and Jesus died for my sins so I can inherit salvation through Him. It takes faith to take hold of that. And a lot of us, we enter this journey with God through that faith. So it takes faith to believe. But then as you go on the Christian journey, you start to get a faith to not just believe in God, but then to believe for the things of God. So you understand the first call, God says, believe in me, believe in Jesus. And then the next thing is then we're invited to this invitation to start believe for the things of God. You know, it's talked about often in the Christian faith, it's like a narrow gate, but leads to a wide place. That Jesus is my way to God, but as I come to God, it's like there's this expanse. There's these things of God I can take hold of. I believe for the gifts of God. I believe for the hand of God. I believe for the power of God. I believe for the Holy Spirit. I believe in God, and I got faith in God, and then I got faith for the things of God. But then I've also learned in my journey, just in my own relationship with God, and being able to watch other people journey with God, it takes faith to believe in Him. It takes faith to believe for the things we ask Him for. God, I'm believing that you can do this. But then it also takes faith to respond to God for the things He's asking of me. So I need faith for what I'm asking God for. But I also need faith for the thing God's asking me for. Because often we apply faith to God, I believe you can move mountains, and this is the mountain I want to move. But you also need a degree of faith that goes, God, I don't just have faith around my requests. I've got faith behind your requests. Where this doesn't make sense, this doesn't line up. But God, if you're asking of it, if you're asking of me, there's something there. And I want to take a moment, look at a passage in Mark 3, verse 1 to 5. I just want to read out this passage and want to look at it this morning. It says, another time Jesus went to the synagogue and a man was there with a shriveled hand. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. And so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Now, many of us understand the context of this kind of environment, a synagogue, the gathering of the Pharisees, the religious people of the day, and the Sabbath. The Sabbath had a lot of laws around it. One of those things is you couldn't complete anything. So healing somebody was part of the completion process. I remember going to Bible college and 2012, and Pastor Mark Stevenson was my principal, took us to the Jewish synagogue here, and we had the opportunity to chat to the rabbi, and one of the questions that was asked was, what does the Sabbath look like today? And that's where he noted, well, you can't complete anything on the Sabbath, so if you're truly to hold to the Sabbath, you wouldn't even be able to turn on a light switch. Because the moment you turn on a light switch, you're completing an electrical current, and because you're part of making that happen, it's unlawful to do on the Sabbath. So he said, most of us just don't, we just forget those parts. But he said, for the devout ones that still hold to the Sabbath, they just set their household up on timers. It can happen, you just can't be a part of it. And there's this degree of what's happening in this. I'm like, that's not a bad day. Just wake up and the world happens. But It's on the Sabbath where Jesus is not able to be involved in the completion of something. But what happens in the story is it says, Jesus said to the man with his shriveled hand, stand up in front of everyone. Then Jesus asked them, which is lawful to do on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched out his hand and it was healed. It was completely restored. There's an incredible story, and there's some things in here I just want to look at this morning. And like I just noted, here's a Jewish man in a synagogue, and his I guess the weakness he would see in his life was the fact he had a shriveled hand. Now for us in 2023, we see that as just an injury. We see that as just a physical thing. But in the day, it wasn't just physical. They would have said that physical defect in a way is a sign of something spiritual. So that you are injured or you are unwell physically because something has gone wrong spiritually. So either your parents sinned, and this is it showing itself in your life, or if it wasn't your parents, perhaps your grandparents sinned, and so this is God showing it up in your life. So when they saw someone like a man with a shriveled hand, they didn't just see someone with a shriveled hand, they saw a sinner. They saw sin. There is something wrong, and this is God punishing you because of it. So if you think about where they're sitting in the context in the synagogue, you got a man who's not just sick, you got a sinner sitting in the room. And because it was the synagogue and because it was the Sabbath, and no doubt more than likely because he's sitting there in the synagogue, he's a good Jewish boy and understands the custom, one thing he wouldn't have had is he wouldn't have had his hand on display. More than likely, he would have had his hand covered up. Because you don't display the sin in the synagogue. And it's amazing because if you look throughout the teachings of Jesus, often what you'd see is you'd see Jesus healing the sick in the street. Because people were open about their sickness in the street. But you don't find many healings in the synagogue. Because the sickness wasn't so on display in the synagogue. Because the synagogue is the place I hide it, not the place I bring it. And the danger with that is that's how they treated God. The danger is we treat God with that same attitude today. That actually the very place that you should be able to come and bring your sickness, the very place you should be able to come and bring your flaws and your weakness is the very place you bring it but hidden. You bring it but hidden. Because we think it's this sickness that's the problem. But as we look at the story goes on, the sickness was not the problem to Jesus. The sin was not the problem to Jesus. If we look at the scripture, what was the problem to Jesus? He was deeply distressed and angry. What? At the stubbornness of their heart. At the stubbornness of their heart. So we can walk into life, we can walk around, look at our own life, we can look at the church and we can think, oh, it's the sin and the sickness of this world that is the problem. But to Jesus, he wasn't so fazed about the sin and the sickness because he can deal with that. He's overcome that. He can work with that. But what distressed him, because what he can't work with is the stubbornness of heart. God can heal your sin. God can heal your sickness. But what he can't work on, because that's yours to work on, is the stubbornness of heart. And you have Jesus in this moment that walks into a room which is dedicated to focusing on God, and finds not an open people, but a closed people. A closed people, where their connection to God was based on behavior. It was performance-based. And so what it does is it drives those who aren't performing to hide. And it's so important even in our faith with God, we understand the great measure of grace towards us. But Jesus walks into this room, and instead of finding freedom, he finds people hiding. He finds himself restricted. He finds himself. But Jesus is deeply distressed at the stubbornness of heart. I wonder how many times you've looked at your life and gone, oh God, look at the sin that's so wrong with me. and you've drawn down to what's wrong with you as your weakness and your sin. But how often have you looked at yourself and gone, yeah, my heart's a bit stubborn? How often have you woken up and not gone, God, just forgive me because I got a little bit angry when that guy cut me off in traffic? You know, how often have you prayed that prayer compared to the very thing that actually distressed the heart of Jesus and gone, God, I think my heart's a bit stubborn? Not very often, because stubbornness is like pride. It's one of those things that it's deceiving. It's deceiving because you're stubborn about the fact that you're not stubborn. It's like pride. You're proud of the fact you're not prideful. It's hard to see in your own life. A good question to deal with what's the level of stubbornness right now is not to ask yourself, but to ask your friend. Ask your spouse. I never realized how stubborn I was until I got married. Up until that point, I just thought I was right. I remember early on in our marriage, Leela's like, you're quite stubborn, aren't you? I'm like, no, I'm just sure. I'm a sure person. I'm just sure this is how it's supposed to be done. Right down to the little things, where the peanut butter lives, fridge or pantry, where the bread goes, what monk, light blue or dark blue. We set up stubbornness about little things in our life, but what I love about Jesus is he walks into this room and kind of, regardless of the stubbornness of this room, Jesus just walks in the room and breaks the rules. The thing about stubbornness is in the Old Testament, what would happen amongst the Jewish people is what stubbornness would lead them to do is stubbornness would lead them away from God. So often Moses would talk about them and God would talk to Moses about them as being a stiff-necked people. It's another way of saying stubborn. They're a stiff-necked people. And in Deuteronomy 9, Moses is even kind of retelling them as a warning, because Deuteronomy is kind of like Moses' last speeches to the people. He's telling them as a warning, hey, remember how many times you have turned away from God. And remember how God called you a stiff-necked people. Remember that your stubbornness, time and time again, has led you from God to other gods, because you're so determined to live this thing your way. You're just so determined that you are right and you know better and you have it under control. That assurance that you would call it, but stubbornness that God would call it, has led you away. And so the Old Testament Jews were led away by it, but New Testament Jews, they weren't so much led to other gods, they were just entrenched where they were. So stubbornness led Old Testament Jews away, but New Testament Jews, the Pharisees, their stubbornness just entrenched them to the experience that they were okay with. So when Jesus shows up, they were so stubborn with how God operates and how I'm going to let God operate and how this thing works that they couldn't take hold of the new thing. So for one, stubbornness takes people away, but the danger probably for a lot of us, because we're still sitting in the room, is that if we don't work on our stubbornness, we can get entrenched in our faith and in a place and miss the very thing God's wanting to do. Miss the very thing God's wanting to do. And that's why I've found the more I invite Jesus into my life, the more he comes in and often just breaks the rules in my world. Now you look at Jesus right throughout Scripture, he's great at breaking rules. And we celebrate it. We celebrate it. He broke the rules when he chose David to be king. He broke the rules when Daniel went in the lion's den. He broke the rules time and time again with what should have happened in those situations. He broke the rules right throughout the Bible. He broke the rules even the way he came into this earth through a virgin. He broke the rules. He broke the rules, took an ordinary group of men and changed the world with them, broke the rules. And we love it when God breaks the rules. But we hate it when God breaks my rules. Like, I got no problem with God breaking thy rules, but God, don't break my rules. Don't break my rules, because we love our rules. We love them. That's why you ever showing up with a group of friends to play a game of cards? You all agree on the game, but what's the question? Well, what rules are we playing? And then you don't get your rules. So you lose, blame the rules. See, if you had stuck to my rules, I would have won. And there's this nature at times where God's just got to show up and walks into the synagogue on the Sabbath and goes, I've got to break some rules here. Because there is a group of people that have become entrenched in their stubbornness. And unless I break some rules, I might stir up anger, but I got to stir up something. And there's sometimes where God will come into your life and just say, I've got to stir something up here. I need to stir. God, why is this happening? Perhaps because God needs to stir something. Maybe you've entrenched yourself. See, the Christian faith, like this whole series, we're in the school of faith, and so we understand you never graduate from it. So the idea is that there's always learning. It's like a child. They go through different learning stages, and we celebrate the different stages. We celebrate when someone's, the reading age of an 8-year-old, awesome. The reading age of a 9-year-old, awesome. The reading age of a 10. But it's not awesome if they stayed at a 10-year-old reading age and they're now 30. We don't celebrate that. We don't celebrate, we stop celebrating what when growth stops happening. And it's important even in our walk with God that we stop to recognize, because the longer you go on this thing, kind of the harder sometimes it can be to see the growth in your life. But we actually have a growing faith. We have a growth that develops. But what I want to look at this morning, while there was a room full of men with stubborn hearts, there was one man that Jesus chose to use. And for this one man in a room full of people, seen amongst his peers as a sinner, wouldn't have been in a seat of prominence, would have been likely been in the corner, happy to mind his own business. All of a sudden, Jesus calls him out and says, stand up. You ever walked in the room and you're like, I'll just stop in, but I just want to stay at the back. And then all of a sudden, the spotlight's on you. You're like, oh, man. This guy would have shown up that morning. But it takes faith, like I said, not just for what? Because the guy didn't pray for healing. The guy didn't come to Jesus and say, can you heal me? That didn't happen. A lot of the other healing stories, people push through the crowd. That they've engaged faith and they've requested by God. This wasn't his request for God. This was God's request for him. And there's times where you need the faith that pushes through, and there's just times where you need faith to respond. Because he did not ask God to do this, but God asked him to respond in the moment. And there's just 3 quick things I want to look at about how this man responds in this moment that I think it takes faith for us to respond in the same way. First, it took faith that God could do it here. He was in the synagogue on the Sabbath. Like, you ever thought, God, there's really here? Like right now, God, like here? Like, you ever had God prompt you to do something? You're like, here, God? There's no band. Like, there's no, you ever had God prompt you to pray for someone and you're in like the car park? You're like, really, God, here? Like, there's environments we love God to work in. Man, I love it when God works at the 5 p.m. Love it when God works at the 10 a.m. Love it when God works in e-group. Love it all the time, but then there's other times where it's awkward for God to move. It's awkward if God moves here. But it takes faith to respond. Not just in the environments you like, but what's the environment right now where you've gone, I don't know if God moves there. You see, on the street, they had a lot, the sick would come to him. No one met Jesus at the synagogue for healing, because that's not where that takes place. But it took faith of this man to go, well, Jesus, we're going to do it. We're going to do it here, I guess. And God's calling upon him to act and respond in a place he doesn't feel comfortable. In fact, you'll find in John 1, when Philip and Nathanael, a lot of us know this story when they were called to be disciples, and Philip runs back and finds Nathanael, in John 1, verse 45, and it says, we found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets all wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nazareth, can anything good come from there, he asked. For the people, it was Nazareth. For Nathaniel, that goes, oh man, God couldn't do anything good there. Where in your life are the environments right now where you struggle to say, yeah, I believe God can move there, but I don't know if God can move there. I believe God could do it over there, but I don't know about here. I don't know about this place. Like, I believe God can move on a Sunday, but this work situation right now, I don't know if God's involved in that. I believe God can work over here, but with what's going on in my friend, I don't know if God works in that. And it's amazing that in certain environments, we have great faith. And in other environments, we almost forget about God. Not completely, but we don't apply the same dimension of faith. But I believe part of the school of faith is learning to have a faith that is not environment dependent. That is not depend. My faith does not depend on the environment. My faith does not matter where I am. My faith is dependent on God and what God can do and where God's moving. Where right now do you struggle to even see God moving? Because perhaps God's saying, come on, it's time to stand up now. It's time to stand up there. Because even in life, we're like, oh God, when I orchestrate the perfect set of circumstances, I will offer my life freely to you. There is no perfect set of circumstances. Oh God, when I get married, then we'll really be able to devote her. Oh, then when we buy a house. Oh, and then when we pay off the mortgage. Oh, and then, oh, now we work so hard, we need to retire. When are you going to be happy with the environment around your life? But Jesus is, I know we're in the middle of the synagogue. Jesus knew exactly where he was. Jesus knew exactly the environment he was in. And what's this called? Stand up now. Stand up here. And for some, there's a faith that God, when this happens, then I will. But the faith in God is just saying, no, God, here. God, I believe you can move here. Here. Come on, where right now is that for you? Because not many of us have got much of a problem of God moving here. But in your family, in your workspace. Come on, in your life. I remember when I finished high school and started the trades, I came off the back of a youth camp and thought I was God's answer to the trades. And after my first smoko break, realized this was more challenging than I thought. And my boss asked me, hey, what do you do on the weekend? And it's my first day on the job. I said, that's on Saturday, went to church on Sunday. He goes, oh, you go to church? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh, good. Don't ever talk about that around here. The last time I brought church up, I gone, God, use me. And then first smoko break, deflated, just completely. And I just said, oh, God, perhaps this isn't 2-3 years go on. And, I said, oh, God, I'm just going to be the best employee I can be. I can't say anything, but it set a thing inside me where I was like, oh, this is just not an environment I feel like God could actually use me. I've just ridden that environment off. I've heard testimonies of other people, but I'm not that guy. Like Manuel could probably do it, but I'm not that guy. And I ripped myself off in that environment until Pastor John Fandano from the Philippines came over. And he came down to the town and went on a hiking trip with my boss. He came along because we do a lot of hiking and stuff together. And Pastor John jumped in my boss's car and I had some other guys in my car. And 30-minute drive to where we were going, I forgot to tell Pastor John that he wasn't a Christian and didn't like you talking about church. So Pastor John just assumed he was a Christian and loved the church. And if you've ever talked to Pastor John about what he's doing in the Philippines, you're gonna hear about it all, what the great move of God. The next smoko, the following week, my boss goes, hey, that guy, I think he thought I went to your church. I was like, oh, no. He leans over the table and says this statement. Why haven't you ever told me all the good things your church does? I love, for 2 years. And it reignited. No, he hasn't come to know God, but we've had open discussions about the gospel, and it gave me my confidence that God can work here. It gave me the confidence, the amount of conversations from then on, I was able to open up about God with different people. But it took a faith to go, no, God can work here. Come on, right now, get a faith. Come on, God doesn't work in certain environments. Come on, it's not when the key's right or the band's on tune. Come on, God moves because we trust in Him. We have faith in Him. And I really get a sense for some, it's like Jesus pointed this man out who was happy just sitting in the corner and just goes, stand up in front of everyone. And there's some environments where God's calling to Christians to go, come on, stand up. Come on, stand up. We need a society that's full of Christians that know how to stand up in their faith wherever we are. The second thing we needed faith for God to move here. He also needed faith that God was going to move now. God was going to move now. It's that sense, well, God, if I'm going to do it, you better come through. Because I'm about to break all the laws I've been taught since I was young. And puts himself out there. Jesus, if I'm going to engage with you in this, I need you to come through now. And it's this idea that we need to have faith that God can move anywhere, but we also need to have faith that God can move now. Because a lot of Christians are excited about tomorrow and celebrate yesterday. But where's the now faith? What is God doing now? What is God doing in this moment? What is God doing here? There needs to be a now. Like he could have yelled out, can we just do it after the surface? Can we do it once everyone's gone? Jesus, no, now. Come on, there's an opportunity, because I've found even in God and in faith, God's gracious and His hand is always towards us, and He's a God of second chances totally. But He's also the God of moments, where there is just moments to respond. And you need to have faith, because often, again, it's like the places we try and get the right set of circumstances, we also try and get the right timing. You're in this thing long enough and work with enough people, you start to hear a lot. All the young people think they're too young, and all the old people think they're too old. I realized at the age of 27, I reckon there's about 2 weeks, I felt the right age for everything. There's 2 weeks gone. But for many, you make time such a big issue. Oh God, this time just doesn't work for me right now. This time. You know, so trying to invite people to E-group. Oh yeah, I don't really do Tuesdays. So, well, why not? We got our routine. I'm like, great, that's good, but at times Jesus kind of steps into your routine and says, for this season, I need to shake this thing up. And you got to have freedom for where God wants to move, but you also need to have freedom for when God wants to move. And often we're delaying to tomorrow what God's asking us to do right now. What God's asking us to do right now. When Joshua was handing out the land to the allotments of land to the different tribes, there was a whole bunch of different tribes, and the largest tribe, the tribe of Manasseh, that tribe was very fruitful. They were large in number. And when he's handing out the allotment, he gives them the largest allotment of land. However, there's some problems with the land, because the land, while it was the largest in size, there was still a lot of battles that needed to be fought. So they had conquered and taken kind of ownership of it, but there was still Canaanites living in places of it, and still forests that need to be cleared. So they come back to Joshua and say, why have you only given us this allotment? And they say this statement, they say that God has blessed us abundantly. And so they're coming to Joshua to ask for more land because God has blessed them abundantly. And some commentaries around that would say that use of has is quite an important word, because what they're saying is God did a good thing. We've conquered a lot of armies. The land we have right now still has a lot of battles in it. And they were thankful for what God did. But the sense of has was this unbelief on whether God was going to do it again and whether God could do it now. And so they were finding other ways to try and take care of themselves because they had lost faith in the now. Yeah, God did fight battles for us yesterday. And God did great things. God will do great things in our future. But there's a now moment. Come on, there's a now moment for us as a church. There's a now moment for me and our family. There's a now moment for me. And it's important that we got a now faith. A now faith. We are not waiting till the building comes about before we have faith to see something happen in the city. We're believing our future's bright, but there is a now in what we're doing. There is a now in who we are. And it's so important because once you've got enough testimonies, so important you don't hang your head up. Go, I'm happy here. The Israelites went on this crazy journey with God. There came a point where they just became entrenched. Now we're happy with it like this. The challenge of responding to the now is not, it's easy to respond to God when your situation's bad. God, save me from this. Sometimes the challenge on the moving now is responding when things are good. But I like it how I've got it. But is there faith in what you're doing right now? In what you're doing right now? And just the last thing, had to have faith for the here, had to have faith for the now. The last thing, he had to have faith that God could work in his weakness. Because often what we like to do, I've found teenagers, just a few years been in ministry, really good at like believing God can work with my weakness. Like really good offering it up. There's a lot. So I found the older I get, the harder that gets. Because I realize what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. I realize who my strength is and where my... And so what I do is I figure that out. And it's good. It's good to become self-aware and good to run in your lane and good to do all those things. But often what we bring to God is what we feel we can offer God. Like, oh yeah, I've figured out this is my lane, so I give that to God. And I say, but there's still times, regardless of your stage of faith, where God will go, no, I want you to respond. I know it's a place where it's not comfortable, but I can work in your weakness. I can work in your weakness. To in front of a Jewish synagogue to stand someone up and say, stretch out your hand, knowing that the hand was symbolic of sin. It would be like me standing someone up here. Hey, tell us your sin. Whoa. That is the environment that Jesus is creating right here. It is a vulnerable moment. It would have been a moment of great judgment. It would have been but he's going, God, I'm trusting you with this. I'm trusting you with this. I'm going to respond with this. And for some of you, you're extending your good service to God. But I feel like even for some of us, young and old, there's areas that we would deem weak. That God's saying, come on, stretch it towards me. Things you're not proud of. Things you're not happy with. And God's saying, stretch that towards me. Because unless that's dealt with, you're going to struggle to have faith to keep going. You're going to struggle to really find that faith again. That God could do it here and God could do it now. You got to extend those things to God. Don't just give God what you think you're good at. The invitation is to give God the life. Give God it all. Give God where you think you got victories and give God where you know you've got failures. But give it to God. Surrender it to God. Don't just give God the best. That's what the Pharisees did. But Jesus just says, come on and hand it towards me. Stretch it towards me. And what happens in that moment? He finds healing in a moment. Because he trusted God. But it takes faith to trust that God can work even in your weaknesses. Weaknesses aren't just always like the areas where you struggle with sin or the areas where you're no good at this. Some of those weaknesses are just, God, I want to, but I just, I'm scared. I'm nervous. I'm unsure. Oh, God, there's all these things in place, and what's going to go wrong? It's those moments. God's just saying, no, just extend it towards me. And trust that I can bring healing. Trust that I can bring answers. Trust that I can bring it together. Hey, why don't we jump to our feet right across the room this morning?